Yeah.
All right.
Hey, we're live.
We're live. Welcome, everyone. Chag Sameach.
Chag
Thank
Sameach.
you
Chag Sameach.
for joining us. We have Rabbi Nickerson, Rabbi Eshel, Rabbi Shapiro, Cantor Peacock, Cantor Gurney, and I'm your host, Rabbi Steve Leader, for our Simchat Torah celebration. We're supposed to be freilich. We're supposed to be happy. If it wasn't for this pandemic, we would be dancing with the Torah tonight. We're going to do some learning and some singing, and we're going to have a beautiful 45 minutes or so together. We're going to begin first with some singing, and we've got Cantor Peacock. Full disclosure, she is at the Irmis campus, and the internet is, how shall we say, intermittent. So we're going to do our best and hope that she can lead us in some singing. Are you
with that face? With that frozen face, I don't know if she's gonna. Oh, no.
Just keep smiling. Keep smiling, and we'll sing.
Go ahead, Lisa. Please lead us. Oy.
Not a good start.
This might be more like a foreign skill than Simchat Torah. I don't know.
I think she looks
there
very
she is.
frail.
She's back.
Go for it, Lisa.
Oh, now she's gone again. Try again, Lisa. It's not going well.
Still smiling after all these years.
All right. We clearly have an internet problem at the Irmis campus. I think, Lisa, let's let Don just do maybe a Hine Matov, and then we'll start our teaching, and hopefully
Okay. Okay. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
That's beautiful. Here we go. Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov la 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 la. Hine matov la 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 la. Hine matov manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov manayim shevet achim gam yachad.
Right. So thank you, Don. Just to give everyone kind of a heads up about where we're headed in this little program of ours, each of the rabbis is going to teach for 5 or 10 minutes on one of their favorite verses from Torah. And then we'll have a little music in between, assuming Lisa comes back from being frozen on the internet. And then, of course, the actual centerpiece of Simchat Torah is a brief Torah service where we'll be reading. Cantor going to be chanting the last few verses of Torah, and then immediately moving to the first few verses of Torah. So that's where we're headed. I am fortunate to be one of the rabbis teaching tonight, and I want to begin my teaching. I want to talk about brokenness. This is such a difficult time in our country, and we feel both because of the pandemic and the civil unrest and the coarseness of our politics right now, that there's a lot of fracturing in our society, a lot of brokenness in our society. So I thought I would take a look at brokenness in the Torah and in the Talmud, and see if we can come to some conclusion about the opportunity within brokenness, which is really what I want to talk about. So first, I want to begin with the story in the Torah, which you all know, this story of Moses going up Mount Sinai to receive the tablets from God, the tablets that contain the 10 Commandments. He comes down from the mountain with a set of tablets in his arms, and he sees that the ancient Israelites had completely lost their faith. He was a little bit late coming back, and they panicked, and they forced Aaron, Moses' brother, the high priest, to fashion a golden calf for them, symbol of a god in Egypt. And they lost their faith in God and started worshiping this idol. Moses sees all of this when he comes down from the mountain. And he's so incensed, so disappointed, so angry that he throws the tablets to the ground and they smash into bits and pieces. Fortunately, as is usually the case in the Torah, God forgives and gives Moses and the people a second chance. He goes back up the mountain again, comes down with a complete set of tablets. And we know, according to Torah, that those tablets, that second set of tablets, was placed in the Aron, in the ark within the Mishkan, that portable sanctuary, and carried with them throughout the desert experience. But the rabbis in Baba Batra in the Talmud ask a really interesting question, which is, what happened to that first set of tablets that was broken into bits and pieces? What happened to all those shards and scattered bits and pieces of the original tablets? And according to the rabbis, the Israelites gathered up the broken bits and pieces and placed them in the Aron right next to the second set of complete tablets. And they carried both the broken and the whole with them through the desert and the wandering experience. The broken and the whole. Normally, things that are broken, holy objects that are broken, or a text, for example, that can no longer be read, they're usually buried. They're not usually treated like they still have their former status. But here we have these shards being treated as if they are still whole. Before I get to why, I want to give some other examples of brokenness in Jewish tradition, and these are all familiar to you. First of all, the most iconic is the breaking of the glass at a wedding, the shattering of a glass, which is a reminder of the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70 AD. So we end this simcha, this joyous wedding, with a reminder of brokenness, of fragmentation. At a Seder, one of the first things we do is we break the matzah, and there are crumbs, and it's broken, and the edges are ragged, and it's a remembrance of the brokenness of servitude, of slavery. Think about the shofar, the sound on the shofar. These are sounds of fragmentation, of brokenness, of alarm even. And then, of course, this example of the tablets. We don't deny brokenness in our tradition. Now, the lesson that the rabbis teach about those shattered fragments being next to the whole fragments, they turn it into a lesson about how to treat an elderly person who has lost his learning, how to treat an elderly scholar, really, technically, who has lost his learning. In other words, how do we treat people who have dementia or Alzheimer's? How do we treat elderly people whose lives have fallen apart, or anyone whose life has fallen apart, anyone whose reality has been shattered into bits and pieces? We gather them up, we place them in the Holy of Holies, and we treat them with the very same respect and dignity as the whole set of tablets, with the very same respect and dignity as a whole and complete person. In other words, brokenness is a call to empathy. I want to say that one more time because I think it's so fundamentally important. When we encounter brokenness, it is a call to empathy. And I'll close with this. In the book of Deuteronomy, it says that God places God's words upon our hearts. And the sages ask, why upon our hearts? If God has the power to place words upon our hearts, surely God could place words in our hearts. So why didn't God just place the words within our hearts? Why does it say on our hearts? And the answer the sages give is that God places God's words upon our hearts, but it isn't until our heart is broken that the words can truly enter. There is something about encountering brokenness that enables us, if we embrace it, to respond with empathy to the brokenness of others, to treat every broken human being with the dignity and respect of that whole second set of tablets, to carry them in our heart as if they are whole. Brokenness is our call to empathy. And never in my lifetime has that call been more important than it is right now as we feel our society fraying at the edges. So that's my Simchat Torah hope and prayer, is that we all respond to the brokenness around us with greater empathy and greater love. Chag Sameach, everyone. Now, David Eshel, we're going to hear your teaching next. It's all yours, my friend.
Wow, that was beautiful. Thank you so much, Rabbi Leader. And it's actually not a bad segue, which I'll explain a little bit later. Okay, so what we were asked to do when Rabbi Nanis was dreaming up this extraordinary program, she asked each of your clergy to choose maybe a line or two from Torah that really speaks to them. And for me, it was a no-brainer. It's the one pop right there for me. It was even, so this line that I chose is the same line that during our ordination, right? I don't know about for the other clergy, but in my ordination, we were asked, we all carried Torahs into the ordination and we all rolled our Torahs to a specific part, to a specific spot. I chose this one as well. And the line that I chose, which I'll get to, I even had, like if you can see right here on my kippah, I had embroidered on my kippah from ordination, and this is my favorite kippah right here. And it's the line about Jacob wrestling with the Ish. Now, what is the Ish? I'm not going to translate it just yet. But the line goes like this. ויוותר יעקב לבדו ויאבק איש עמו עד עלות השחר. That Jacob was left alone, and an Ish, I'm not translating it just yet, wrestled with him, meaning Jacob, until the break of dawn, until the bringing of the dawn. Now, what is going on? What's the backstory and what's about to happen? Right? This is after the whole thing with Jacob and Esau, and where Jacob disguises himself as Esau with the help of his mother, with his mother's idea to deceive their father Isaac to get the birthright, and then it just completely fractures the relationship in this family, right? This family, the brokenness in this family just completely fractures his relationship with his brother, right? And then he is forced to flee, and then he goes out into a wilderness on his way to Haran, where his mother's family is from, and he's supposed to go over there. And there is where he encounters Jacob's ladder, and he has this conversation with God, where it's an if then, God saying to Jacob, I'm gonna make you the numerous as the stars and the sands, and he's like, well, if you do this for me, God, then I will X, Y, and Z, and be that person for you. So he's having these struggles with his relationship with God as well. And then he goes, and there's the deception about he wants to marry Rachel. Then there's the deception where it turns out to be Leah. And so he then works another 7 years, and he marries Rachel as well. So now he's worked 14 years, married 2 women. Now he's had children. Now he's on his way back to his home. And turns out, here comes Esau. That they know that there's going to be a reckoning with his brother. The last they did, Esau wanted to kill him. And here comes the reckoning. So Jacob sends his entire family and the people who came with them and all the stuff to one side of the river, and he stays by himself, right? And what happens? Jacob is left alone. And an Ish comes and wrestles with him till the break of dawn. But the Ish did not prevail. Right? When the Ish saw that he was not going to defeat Jacob, he wrenched Jacob's hip. So he's like, right? So now he's scarred, right? He has a scar here. He was injured, and then it's going to heal into a scar. And Then the Ish says, let me go to Jacob. But Jacob says, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. He said, let me go because the sun's coming up. So the night is almost over. He said, well, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. So he said, what is your name? Jacob. He said, well, you're no longer just going to be known as Jacob. You'll be known as, get ready for this, Yisrael. Israel, Yisrael. This is where we get our name, Bnei Yisrael, children of Israel. Yisrael, the one who struggles with the divine, right, and humans, and succeeds. The one who struggles with the divine, and you have prevailed, you have succeeded. So our tradition asks the question, well, who is this Ish? Right? What is this Ish? It can be translated as man, right? But our tradition asks the question, well, is it really another human being? Perhaps it was an angel sent by God, not unlike the angels that God sent to Abraham and Sarah as a test in them welcoming the stranger into their tent. They appeared as humans, but were in fact angels. Was it God, God's self? Was it the angel of Esau? Or was it also Jacob's own consciousness, right? And the answer to that question is yes, I think. I think it's all of it, right? This is real teshuvah here. He is going through the steps where he's recognizing and he is talking about all the different things that he has done in his life, the choices that he has made, right? The outcomes of those choices, the fractured relationships, the lies, the deceits, his own struggle with his relationship with God, giving an if then, if you do this for me, God, then I'll do this, right? And what happens is in his struggle with this alone, right, he defeats it. He surpasses it, but he is also scarred from it, right? He's injured from it, but he prevails. So why is this line so important to me? Because I think this is all of us, right? We all struggle. We all wrestle, whether it's with relationship with God, relationship with our families, relationship with ourselves, relationship with our community, with our world, right? We all struggle with these things. And we are also injured and scarred by these things. But one way to look at the scar, right, is to not look at it solely as something that was painful as a result of brokenness, but rather a scar also represents healing, right? A scar also represents that we're still here, we're still alive. And we don't forget about them, just like when Rabbi Leader was talking about the tablets. We don't forget about them and get rid of them, but we hold on to them as a reminder. And those scars turn less from pain and real struggle, right, to memory and representation of healing, and that we are still here, and that we will ultimately prevail. So that's my teaching for Simchat Torah, and I hope that you also take a look at that portion. It's one of my favorites.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Eshel. Lisa Cantor Peacock, are you with us still, or have we lost you? Don, you're muted. Don Gurney.
There we go. Lisa can't get on.
Okay.
So we're gonna fly without her unless she gets back on.
All right. Something you want to sing with us, Cantor Gurney?
Absolutely. How about we got a couple of Torah Ruach songs, right? Because the world is sustained by three things: Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim. Al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, ha'olam omed. Al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, al shlosha devarim, ha'olam omed. Al haTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gemilut chasadim, על התורה ועל העבודה ועל גמילות חסדים.
All right. Let's see. Rabbi Shapiro, you're up. You're muted.
You're muted.
You know, you'd think
Unmute
7
yourself.
months into this, we'd all have figured out the mute unmute thing a little bit better. But Hag Sameach, everyone. So wonderful to be
No,
together.
I think Jessica's just choosing whom to mute and whom not to mute.
That's quite fair. Wonderful to be together celebrating Simchat Torah this evening. So many of us are probably familiar with the story of Jacob's ladder. After stealing his brother Esau's birthright, to review, Jacob is on the run and he camps for the night in the desert. He finds a rock and he lays his head down on the rock. Just as a side note, I think that should be reason enough to all appreciate our down-filled and Tempur-Pedic pillows tonight when we go to bed. But he goes to sleep and he has a dream. And in his dream, there's a giant ladder that ascends up to the heavens, and angels are on this ladder. Now, truth be told, I don't think I ever really thought too much about this story. I think maybe subconsciously I dismissed it as this kind of mythological, allegorical thing, particularly the whole bit about the angels, probably imagining halos and wings and all sorts of things like that. But a couple of years ago, I read the story a little bit closer, and my entire understanding of it changed in a way that I think has a lot to teach us today in the midst of a global pandemic. So let's look a little bit closer at the story. And if anybody's following along with the Tanakh or Humash or has the text in front of you, you can look at Genesis 28:12. And the verse says that Jacob dreamed. And lo, a ladder was set on the ground with its top reaching to the heaven. And lo, angels of God were going up and coming down on it. Angels of God were going up and coming down on it. And when I read this closer a few years ago, I thought, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Because if we think about it, we would expect the angels to be going down the ladder and then up. The angels ought to be descending from heaven down to earth. But it's just the opposite. It's just the opposite. The angels are ascending from earth to the heavens because the angels are not in the heavens. The angels are here among us. Now, I know that all of us read the same newspapers. We watch the same news. It's mostly discouraging. We have 4 million acres have burned in California this year. There's so many hurricanes in the Gulf that we've actually run out of names for them, and we're barely halfway through hurricane season. We're battling systemic racism, problems with policing, not to mention the disheartening state of our politics. And all the while, the global pandemic rages and imprisons so many of us in our homes and has taken 220,000 American lives. But despite it all, despite all of that, there are still angels among us, maybe now more than ever. Jade Powell is a student at the University of Nevada, and she got an idea a few months ago to organize a few volunteers to help out during the pandemic because her mom had called some of her elderly neighbors and asked them if they needed anything from the store. So she started this thing called Shopping Angels. And she got 20 of her sorority sisters together, and they went shopping for groceries for older adults who were shut in and couldn't get out. And the need started to grow and word started to spread. And she reached out on social media. She recruited more volunteers. And then she found out that a lot of elderly people lived in poverty and couldn't actually afford groceries, much less go get them. So she started a GoFundMe page to raise some money to then help those folks who couldn't afford groceries. And she now has volunteers all over the country. Basira Papul is a polio worker in Afghanistan. And for years, she's traveled from home to home, vaccinating kids, trying to help eradicate polio there. And when COVID hit, she was sidelined. She and all of her coworkers had to stop because of social distance considerations. But that didn't stop her. She got together with those coworkers and they started distributing bars of soap, plain old soap. And they gave hygiene tips, showed families how to use the soap and to help curb the spread of the virus. To date, she and her coworkers have distributed 1 million bars of soap to help keep families safe. Ethel Branch lives on the Navajo reservation in Arizona. And when the first cases of the coronavirus were reported on the reservation, the Navajo and the Hopi reservations, she realized how many of the elderly folks there, her neighbors, were living without electricity, without water, and would surely need support. And so she's a lawyer by training. She resigned from her job at a law firm. She started a GoFundMe page. She built an organization called Navajo Hopi Solidarity to help bring relief to the elderly, to single parents and to struggling families. And so far, she has raised $5 million and helped more than 5,000 families across the reservations. All over the world, there are hundreds of thousands of people who are currently participating in coronavirus vaccine trials, potentially risking their own lives so that a safe and effective vaccine can be brought to market for all of us. We are surrounded by angels. Again, maybe now more than ever. The grocery workers who keep the shelves stocked, the Uber and the Lyft drivers, the Postmate and the Amazon drivers, and so many others who deliver the entire world to our doorsteps, making it possible for all of us to stay in the comfort of our homes, are all angels. The dedicated healthcare workers. Think about the first responders who show up to work every single day. They can't work from home, and they put themselves at risk to save lives. They're all angels. You know, Abraham Lincoln spoke about the better angels of our nature. And he was so right, because we all have that potential. We all have that potential to be those angels. Every time we zoom into a funeral or a bris or a bar mitzvah or a shiva, those times when we cry together, even on Zoom, even on the phone, even on FaceTime, and those times when we celebrate together, we are angels. When we make a socially distanced visit to an elderly friend or a family member who cannot leave the house, reminding them that they're not alone, as lonely as they may feel, we're angels. When we support the businesses and the institutions and the people who have been hit harder than we by the economic impact of the pandemic, we're angels. Every time we reach out to someone else in friendship and in love, we're angels. So that's really all it takes sometimes. A little compassion, the opportunity to express some kindness, some empathy. And I think that's the simple truth that Jacob's dream teaches us, that angels are all around us, angels are among us, and that each and every one of us has the potential to be one. Now more than ever, and we need each other to be those angels now more than ever. Chag Sameach, and I'm happy to hand it over to Rabbi Nickerson. Joel?
Thank you, Bo. I love those stories you shared about those people. I'm curious, where did you find those? Those are amazing stories.
All over the
Did you
place.
just
And I'll say I cherry picked, 3. There are, countless others. So many. I got them from a few different places. But 2 of the 3 actually came from a piece that Bill Gates wrote on the Gates Foundation, on his own blog for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, talking about the folks that he has, encountered and folks that they're supporting, just doing, incredible things. And again, that's 3. They could have of hundreds. There's so many folks out there, so many folks that all of us know, so many folks probably watching us now who are doing things large and small that are really impacting other people and helping us all through this experience.
Thank you, Bo. Beautifully done.
Thank
Rabbi Nickerson, teach us.
you. Okay.
Wait, Joel, are you getting this information that you're about to share from the leaflets dropped by that helicopter hovering above you, or?
You know what? I'm maximizing my time in my sukkah. So with Cantor Gurney on Friday night
That's
for
right.
my Blair Witch Project experience, but
All right.
we should be done before the sun sets this time. So yes. Yes, thank you. So I wanted to share, actually, Rabbi Eshel's passage is one that speaks very deeply to me. And actually, I got to Rabbi Nanis too late because I was going to choose the same verse. So I loved hearing Rabbi Eshel's commentary on that. And actually, it's also going to be my daughter's Torah portion, her bat mitzvah in a few months. So very exciting. But I want to share a passage with you from the book of Numbers. Now, the book of Numbers, it takes place in the summer, so it's not as well known as some of the other books, but I think it has some of the best stories that you can find in the Torah, especially about the struggle to figure out not only a personal identity but a collective identity. So this passage in particular, this one about Moses, is one that changes the trajectory of his life and the Israelite people. And I thought, since we are in a time right now where so much seems to be changing around us, what can we learn from this passage? So we have here from Numbers 20, verses 8 through 10. Little bit of context. Right before this, Miriam, Moses and Aaron's sister, dies. And as soon as she dies, the Israelites yet again complain, as they do throughout their journeying throughout the desert. This time they complain about a lack of water. There's a great midrash about how Miriam had a well with her wherever she went through the desert, and so when she dies, that well dries up. And so they are yearning for water. They complain yet again. All they do is kvetch on this entire journey through the desert. And so here, this happens right after they complain about the lack of water. And you and your brother, this is now God speaking, you and your brother Aaron, take the rod and assemble the community, and before their very eyes order the rock to yield its water. Thus you shall produce water for them from the rock and provide drink for the congregation and their beasts. Moses took the rod from before the Lord as he had commanded him. Moses and Aaron assembled the congregation in front of the rock, and he said to them, "Listen, you rebels, shall we get water for you from this rock?" And Moses raised his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod. Out came copious water, and the community and their beasts drank. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not trust me enough to affirm my sanctity in the sight of the Israelite people, therefore you shall not lead the congregation into the land that I have given them." This is a huge turning point. Moses has been leading these people through the desert, dealing with their kvetching since the beginning of their journey from Egypt. He now, because of this one incident, is no longer going to be able to enter the land of Israel with all those people he's been leading for so long. And so it's a really interesting story that right here in Numbers, we have the leader of the community who, because of one mistake, is punished to the point where he can't see his vision through to the end. And I think this story raises a lot of really important points that our tradition is trying to teach us about our own, not only leadership, but how we deal with a variety of emotions. So the first thing here, God commands him to order the water to come out of the rock. And what does he do? Instead of saying, God is going to give you this water, he says, "Listen, you rebels, shall we get water for you out of this rock?" The first mistake that happens here is that Moses takes credit for something that is not his credit to take. And this is why in our tradition we have this idea that we are supposed to give credit and kavod and honor to those who have taught us something. So if you're teaching something, just like we're trying to teach our children that they should use MLS and cite appropriately, built into our tradition is this idea, and I apologize again for the sounds above me, that we have this responsibility to give credit to those who came before us, who have taught us the lessons, that part of our responsibility is to share with people that we aren't just the genesis of all the ideas that come up and out of our mouths, that we are part of a long tradition, and that there's a beauty in the fact that we are linking what we are teaching to something that came before us. That linking something to a greater tradition is actually a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. That we get caught up in our society with being the one to discover, that instead of focusing so much on us being the one to discover, we should instead give credit to the fact that there's an entire system that has helped new discoveries to come about, and we should give recognition to that. The second thing that happens here is that he hits the rock. Now, God says, if you see, before their very eyes, order the rock to yield its water. God does not say, hit the rock so that the water comes out. God says, use your voice. And here, another mistake that Moses seems to make is that he uses his anger and he uses physicality instead of words to try and make a point. And how often do we get caught up sometimes, especially if we think about our kids? I mean, I have to do this with my kids sometimes, where instead of using our bodies to try and make a statement, if we can learn to use words, that can change all kinds of things. And here Moses falls into the trap, a trap that he hasn't necessarily fallen into too much on his journey, but at this point, it's as if he's so overwhelmed, and we can imagine those times where we're feeling so overwhelmed, where we want to hit the pillow, we want to go out, we got to use our bodies physically, that one of the mistakes, again, that Moses falls into here is that he uses his body instead of his words. And yes, it might seem cliche, and we might want to seem to see that as something that we teach our children, but if we think about what we've seen in the world these days, we see that people are using violence, they're using physicality to try to make points, and instead of actually using words. And our tradition is very much about the power of words, and that we have a responsibility to try and use words before we use violence. Another issue that seems to be happening here is that he loses his temper, right? As he says on the bottom here, listen, you rebels, shall we get water from you out of this rock? Now, I think here is a statement about what it means to try and be a leader, and what it means for us to look at the leaders that we see around us. A leader is someone who doesn't disparage and diminish those with whom he or she is leading. That using language such as rebels, calling people names, is not something that our tradition sees as something that you uphold. Instead, that is a diminishing quality. If we are to believe that we are made in the image of God, I was just at religious school this morning, going and zooming into some classes, talking about B'Tselem Elohim. I was on religious school TV. That's our religious school tefillah with Rabbi Eshel this morning, and we were talking about what does it mean to be made in the image of God. Well, if we are going to see that each of us is made in the image of God, we don't diminish the human qualities of other people. And that what Moses does here is that he uses language that is an attempt to pull people down. And especially for someone who is a leader, to use that type of language is seen as something that isn't what we're supposed to do as leaders. And so I think, again, we have an example here of his failure to understand his position, and that sometimes you can say things behind the scenes and behind closed doors, and you can keep things in your mind, but as soon as you share those outwardly, that's a problem. And finally, I think this what stands out to me is that despite these challenges, despite the flawed characteristics of Moses, which I think actually is a really important lesson for us to learn, that of course not only leaders but all of us have those flawed characteristics, and we have to recognize that. And the beauty of the Torah is that many of the characters are flawed and are realistic, and we are supposed to connect with them, and we can connect with them because we have the same flaws they do. But what's really wonderful about Moses, and what I think is a really important lesson about the types of people we should look up to, is that Moses is someone, when he is given the punishment that he is not going to be able to enter the land of Israel with all of these Israelites, with all the people he's leading, he doesn't just walk away and say, all right, y'all, good luck. Best of luck on the rest of your journey to the promised land. Since I can't enter with you, you're on your own. No, he sticks with them. He decides that his position of leadership is to take them to the edge of that, to up to the edge, and they're on their own after that, but that he's going to follow through until the very end. And that's an important lesson for all of us. We may not be able to see through all the goals that we have set for ourselves or that others may have set for us, but we do have a responsibility to follow through. We do have a responsibility to give our all up until the very end. And when we can do that, we can redeem ourselves. So those are just a few things that I think stick out from this passage from Chukat, which is found in the book of Numbers. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. I can only imagine with 3 daughters at home how often you have to talk about using words instead of
Every once in a while.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
I see a daughter there.
Oh, yeah, Bo has a daughter there.
Look
Yeah.
at that
Oh, I
daughter.
see we have Evie with us. Let's see Evie.
Don't we need a Torah song?
Let's have one piece of music, Don,
Here
and then
we
we're gonna
go.
do our Torah service. Okay?
Come on, we all know this. Ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu uvahem negeyamam v'rayla. Ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu uvahem negeyamam v'rayla. Ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu uvahem negeyamam v'rayla. Ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu uvahem negeyamam v'layla.
Thank you so much. And now we go to sort of the crown jewel of Simchat Torah, which is the ending and the beginning. It's so cliche to say that every ending is a beginning, but it's also true. Every ending leads to a beginning. I was meeting. I'm the rabbi for the kindergarten class at Browerman East and West, and we spent some time this week talking about the difference between a line and a circle. That a line has a beginning and an end, but a circle has no beginning and no end, and that Torah is like a circle, not a line. That we never stop. We get to the end of the Torah today, and we immediately roll to the beginning and start again. And none of the kids had any idea what this is. But we know this is a slinky. And this might sound simplistic, but I think of my own Torah study like a slinky. It's circular, and yet it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. I study the same material year after year after year after year, but it pulls me more deeply each year as I change as a person. And it's not that the Torah changes, it's that I change. It draws us deeper, and there's always more to learn, and we never stop. And that's symbolically demonstrated by ending Torah and beginning Torah, which is what Cantor Gurney is about to do for us now. So let's go to our Torah reading for tonight.
It's all self-explanatory. Chag Sameach, everyone. A beautiful, meaningful, and joyous Simchat Torah to each and every one of you. I'm here in our magnificent sanctuary. I've left the doors of the Aron Kodesh, our holy ark, open for all to see and be reminded of the light emanates from the Torah and from our Aron Kodesh, which houses those Torah scrolls, as a reminder to all of us of the meaning and the fundamental inspiration that we derive from the Torah itself. In a moment, I'll be chanting our Torah scrolls 2 for all of us today. As is the tradition on Simchat Torah, we chant from the very end and back to the beginning without a pause. In every ending is the hope and the potential for a new beginning. And may our new year, and we need it so badly, be filled with health, comfort, joy, and a renewed spirit to do good in the world. And now, join me in the Torah blessings. Let's make a magnificent cacophony for all the world to hear. Are we ready? Here we go. Baruch hu et Adonai hamavorach. Baruch Adonai hamavorach leolam va'ed. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim. V'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch ata Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Vayivku bnei Yisrael et Moshe בערבות מואב 30 יום, ויתמו ימי בכי אבל משה. ויהושע בן נון מלא רוח חוכמה, כי שמח משה את ידיו עליו. וישמעו אליו בני ישראל ויעשו כאשר ציווה אדוני את משה. ולא קם נביא עוד בישראל כמשה, אשר ידעו אדוני פנים אל פנים. לכל האותות והמותים אשר שלחו אדוני לעשות בארץ מצרים, לפרעה ולכל עבדיו ולכל ארצו, ולכל היד החזקה ולכל המורא הגדול, אשר עשה משה לעיני כל ישראל בראשית ברא אלוהים את השמיים ואת הארץ. והארץ הייתה תוהו ובוהו וחושך על פני תהום, ורוח אלוהים מרחפת על פני המים. ויאמר אלוהים יהי אור, ויהי אור. וירא אלוהים את האור כי טוב, ויבדל אלוהים בין האור ובין החושך. ויקרא אלוהים לאור יום, ולחושך קרא לילה. ויהי ערב ויהי בוקר יום אחד. ויאמר אלוהים יהי רקיע בתוך המים, ויהי מבדיל בין מים למים. ויעש אלוהים את הרקיע, ויבדל בין המים אשר מתחת לרקיע ובין המים אשר מעל הרקיע. ויהי כן. ויקרא אלוהים לרקיע שמיים, ויהי ערב ויהי בוקר יום שני. ויאמר אלוהים יקבעו המים מתחת השמיים אל מקום אחד, ותראה היבשה. ויהי כן. ויקרא אלוהים ליבשה ארץ, ולמקווה המים קרא ימים. וירא אלוהים כי טוב. ויאמר אלוהים תדשא הארץ דשא, עשב מזריע זרע, עץ פרי עושה פרי למינו, אשר זרעו על הארץ. ויהי כן. ותוצא הארץ דשא, עשב מזריע זרע למינו, ועץ עושה פרי אשר זרעו למינו. וירא אלוהים כי טוב. ויהי ערב ויהי בוקר יום שלישי. Let's join in the blessings after. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
All right. Thank you for that, Don. Chag Sameach.
Sameach.
We're leaning into the new reality tonight. Aren't we? We're not pretending nothing's changed. Everything is changed. Yeah. For those of you who are wondering, that was not Elijah bringing a Torah scroll in and placing it in the throne during dawn chanting. That was Erica, who works for us. And, you know what? Here's the good news about tonight. The Purim spiel. No. Here's the good news.
It's already written. It's already written, Steve.
The Purim spiel is done and recorded already. We're good. We got it.
Oh my
All right. Well, for those of you watching, you're supposed to be happy on Simchat Torah. So we're having fun tonight, and I hope you learned a little something. A reminder: we're taking a break now, and then at 7:00. At 7:00, you can watch on Zoom. You can get to it from the temple's website or in the email that you received today from the temple. And we'll be screening a film called Commandment 613. And it is a very brief 23-minute documentary about a sofer, a scribe who writes Torah scrolls. And then afterward, Jody Berman will be leading a Q&A with the producer of the film and the scribe himself. It's a pretty amazing opportunity. So I hope everyone will go enjoy a little bit of dinner and maybe the Lakers game for a little while, and then come back and join us at 7:00 for that brief 23-minute documentary and the Q&A with the director and with the producer and the subject of the film. Chag Sameach, everyone. Thank you. Thank you to our rabbis and Cantor Gurney. It's really fun for all of us to be with you tonight. Chag Sameach, everyone.
It certainly was.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, everyone.